I'm Laura Bonnell, and this is the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast coming to you from Detroit. Please subscribe and even rate and comment on our podcasts when it moves you. I learn something new with every podcast, and I'm always inspired by the people that are showcased here. We don't give medical advice. You need to connect with your doctor for that. I hope that this Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast educates you and sparks some volunteering or advocacy. The CF community needs people like you. Thanks to our sponsor, Viatris, for their support. I initially heard about Amanda Boone when Colorado's government was trying to pass the Prescription Drug Affordability Board, or PDAB, and Amanda, who has CF, began advocating like crazy, holding everyone involved accountable. And prior to 2019, Amanda's health was declining, and then Trikafta, a CF modulator drug, was approved by the FDA, and this groundbreaking drug gave Amanda her life back, and it kept her from needing a lung transplant. Amanda lost so many friends over the years to CF, and she carries a profound sense of gratitude for every additional day that she is alive. Now, Amanda is the co-founder of CF United, and it's a grassroots organization that is dedicated to ensuring continued affordable access to CF therapies, and every member is either a patient or a caregiver. Prior to CF United, Amanda served on the advocacy board, Dell Children's Medical Center in Austin, Texas, and volunteered with the CF Foundation. And when Trikafta faced affordability challenges through the PDAB in Colorado, CF United emerged as a strong advocate and successfully influencing decisions to maintain accessibility. CF United's advocacy goes beyond preserving access, and they champion the independent patient voice. So let's get right into all the issues that we have been advocating about and for, because it's a really good conversation. There's a lot of information going on in this podcast, but we have a bunch of links and show notes that will help you better understand if you ever get lost. Hi, Amanda. I can't believe we haven't met in person. But yeah, I mean, we're the best advocacy friends there could be.
I know. I wish that we lived closer, because I feel like you and I would be knocking down doors just like together.
I know. Colorado, Michigan. I mean, I could get there. We will. We will someday. And maybe we'll meet up in DC one day. You never know. Oh, that's for sure going to happen. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I love that you told me before we started recording that there are antelope walking around.
Yes. We're really in the Wild West out here. I live in a rural part of Colorado, and it's great. But yeah, my dogs were going up because we have antelope just like, on the front of our property right now. So we're really lucky to live in a place where it's just so beautiful.
And you are, because when I see some of your photos that you share, like the family outside, and I think it might have been 60 degrees here that day, and you had like this blizzard, and everybody was outside. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not ready for that, I think is exactly what I said to you, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm not really used to the cold still, because I'm originally from Texas, but I've been here 6 years, so I've gotten kind of used to it, and it's like a dry cold, so it's a little different, I guess, than but yeah, it is beautiful. Thank you. It's great.
Before we get into all the advocacy that you're doing, I first wanted you to give everyone kind of a brief journey of how CF has been for you.
Yeah, sure.
How your health has been.
So, well, it was a dumpster fire to begin with, but it's doing much better now. But how it started out is I was a working young professional, had a child on the way through a gestational carrier surrogate.
And what work were you doing?
Manager in Austin. Okay. So I did multifamily development, and I also did at one time HOA residential, but I was working at a multifamily property or a big apartment complex. And I was doing okay, but I was still not healthy enough to carry my own child. So I was very lucky that I had a surrogate. I mean, just miracle. Carry our son. And so I was looking forward to having him, hopefully being able to work still and just, go about life. But when my surrogate was 12 weeks pregnant, I got sick with the flu. and it just took my lungs down. And I had my flu shot that year, but I got it. And after that, I spiraled. And that year I think I had 6 IV hospitalizations that year while I was working. And so I had a port, so I would have my port access, go to work, but it was just too much. So I ended up having to quit working right before my son was born and go on disability. So that was really hard, really tough for me.
What year was that?
2015, sorry. And so as time went on, as I was entering end stage CF, which is what we all know is like at that point, you either have to have a transplant or, what happens, unfortunately. And so I got some second opinions because I was going to have a lobe from my lung removed. And I was like, oh, this is scary, And so I went and got a second opinion at National Jewish in Denver, Colorado. And they saved my life. They literally did. And so I had to move up here and get a treatment from them because I had an microbacterium infection that I needed IVs for a long period of time. And I needed to be closely monitored with them. And I was literally living in and out of the hospital, and I was on oxygen and it was awful experience. I had no family here. At first we moved here and we just didn't know anyone. My son was 2 years old. And right before Trikafta came out, I was being evaluated for a lung transplant here in Denver. And it was scary. I mean, most people who have had transplants talk about this time. It's a scary time because you're sick, you're scared, you don't know what's going to happen. But in November of 2019, Trikafta came out and I got on it. And within 4 days, I had such improvement that when I went for my transplant evaluation, it was literally 4 days after I started this pill. They were like, what are you doing here? I think they were like, you're stable. Your blood gases are good. You don't need oxygen. Yes, my body was still damaged. So I wasn't just like overnight sensation. I was also very, very underweight. And so I was still sick and I have CF earlier diabetes, but they said, as of now, keep taking that pill and go home and enjoy your family. And I was just like, just tears because I was just so relieved. And as that year went on, my body just started to recover and I got my life back. I remember the first day it was snowing and we went sledding. I could never get up the hill. I would just stay down and watch my son and take pictures. I ran up the hill with him and went sledding down the hill. And I was just like, it was amazing. It was just amazing to have my life back. And literally just my life was saved. And I was able to avoid transplant. And I was able to, now I still go to the hospital and I still do treatments, but it's like once a year versus 6. And they're like tune-ups, they're easier. I'm not on a BiPAP or, those types of things. I'm stable, kind of, that kind of thing. But I do still do breathing treatments because I am an older CFer, elder, as they would call us. I'm in my 40s or early 40s. And, I still have that damage. But other than that, I'm doing really well.
You are doing really well. And there's so many different directions we have to go because, here you are living with a chronic illness and everything you just told us, battling all of this. And it reminds me of when people say, and we've all done this, is you have to spend the day fighting with the insurance company when you're sick. But you and so many are not only fighting that day with the insurance company, you're also working on legislation. You're working to save the future for your life. And I'm advocating so that after I'm not around, there will be legislation that will protect my daughters and you and everyone else. But it's just like to be working so hard when you're also working so hard to raise a child and stay healthy. I mean, it's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah. Some people think I'm crazy. I've always been a type A personality. I mean, my doctor back in Austin used to tell me the only reason you're alive is you're just such a stubborn person. And I mean, he said that in a good and bad way, but I've always been on the advocacy track as well. When I got sick, I had to take a little break from, CF world. But as soon as I needed to get back into it, I will, just because I feel like I have to do these things to protect us. Sometimes I wish I didn't know what was going on in the world, I could just live in my happy little bubble. And I had to do that when I was sick because I was just surviving. But because we know that the world is not just a happy little world. Unfortunately, there's a lot of barriers to access for CF patients and people with disabilities that we have to find ways to strategize to keep our way of life and make sure that we can protect the future. So a lot of times, like what you said about your daughter just really hit me, because I think about that too. And I think about the legacy of the next generation of CF warriors, because I think of the people who still don't have Trikafta. They don't have any modulator. They don't have anything yet. There's things that are coming down the line, but there's nothing there. So I want to protect the way that our state, and our country, the way that healthcare is, so that those people have access to that drug when it comes out, because they need a lifeboat so bad. And I just can't imagine being in their position, still struggling and not having something. So I think about them, and I think about the children. What really gets me is the children right now that get Trikafta and get to prevent damage to their bodies, their organs. Like, that's incredible. I hope they never have to go through any of the dark days that a lot of us older CFers have had to go through, just in the trauma, the mental, the physical. I'm like, I hope it's just to them. I hope it's just like an annoying, mild chronic disease, not a whole life altering terminal illness. So yeah, it's so large and so heavy sometimes, the work that we do. It's fun too, right? It can be fun. It can be stressful, but it's so important, I think.
It is. And this new one that's out now, that's, a triple combo, 1 pill a day. That's fantastic. 6 and older, not as young as the Trikafta one goes, but it's very exciting. I wanted to, before we get into all the nitty gritty about all these bills and everything, I just want to say that we always, you and I and every advocate, always wants to work with lawmakers. We want to work with the insurance companies. We don't hate anyone. We all believe we all need to work together, and we need to find a way and to help raise awareness to other people. So I just preface it with that before we get into it, because, our RDAC in Michigan, the Rare Disease Advisory Council, did not make it through for many reasons I'm not going to go into, but I still did think, even though it's crushing and like, oh my gosh, we've worked on it for years and it was so close with our third sponsor and then it didn't pass. But I thought, oh my gosh, the good is you were putting stuff supporting us on social media. Like, everybody was engaged. We have new people in the fight now. Awareness was raised. Lawmakers tried. Right. So there is a lot of good that came out of it. Now we just have to get it done this year. So there's so many challenges and so many times that we're frustrated, but we always go in with a great attitude.
Yeah, and it's okay to have a bad day. Like yesterday when you texted me when I said, hey, did the RDAC get passed? And you said, no, my heart sank for you, because I know how hard you have worked for it. I know you and everybody else.
So many people, yeah.
And everybody that's been championing you around the country. And so I knew it. We have an RDAC here in Colorado, and I know how important it is to have. And that's why when I called, I said, hey, I'm involved with the Rare Disease Advisory Committee here in Colorado. Please pass this legislation. And so I think, it's okay to take it, like you said, it's just okay to be sad and be a little depressed about it. But then, yeah, you're like, I was really impressed how you got out there and said, okay, we're going to come back next year. That's all we can do, and the more the little bit you get in people's mind about the rare diseases and the advocacy that we need, I think it kind of like it settles in there for next year. And like, oh, I remember this one person I talked to, I met with her, or I had coffee with her, or, I remember her daughter, like I have a CF mom who is a major advocate with CF United, and she brings her picture of her daughter with us to the Capitol, and she'll bring also like postcards, because her daughter's a really good photographer, and she'll bring like her work to show them, like, this isn't what my daughter's doing. She's living, she's thriving. And so on this, medication. And so anyways, I think I think those people remember us and our stories, even if they can't help us at that moment in time, or they try to, or like you said, whatever the powers that political political BS that happens that we have no control over, but they still, I think they remember our stories, you know?
Absolutely.
At least I like to hope they do.
Right. No, I think they definitely do. And I wondered, when did you start thinking I'm going to advocate, or did it just morph into that? Because it kind of, I always wanted to raise awareness, but really, I didn't realize, I mean, I've been advocating my whole life since, you know, the girls were diagnosed. And now I'm just like in the sweet spot, as they say, of, wow, I love this. I love this. I love it because I meet you, and we get to meet so many people, and we're making a difference. And it feels really, I always say therapy, because I feel like I am doing something. I cannot just do nothing, you know. So I wondered, yeah, when you got started and what moved you to take action.
I think it was feeling no control. Or losing control of the situation. So, well, we know what happened last year here in Colorado. I'll just sum it up for anybody who didn't know what happened here in Colorado for the CF population. But there's a Prescription Drug Affordability Board that the Division of Insurance with our state has decided they're going to review drugs and try to lower their costs on them, which at first sounded good. I mean, honestly, we were like, okay. However, how they are trying to lower the drugs is through price capping, which is something they do in other countries like Canada, the UK, Australia, those types of countries. And so it affects reimbursement. And so it's a highly complicated thing, and we'll probably get into it more. But it basically, once we started doing the research and talking to experts in the field of, you know, drug pricing negotiations and things, we found out it's really not good for rare diseases, because we have one drug right now, right? Well, now we have two, but one that we can take. And so there's no alternative. And so those putting a price cap on Trikafta could have caused Vertex to have to leave the state. It also could have caused our pharmacists not to be able to stock the medication. So that's actually how I found out. So I found out through a friend who has CF, you know, like we all do. It's such a small community. And CFRI, actually, Sariva had let her know. My friend's name is Sabrina, and she helped Sabrina Walker. She's amazing. She wrote some op-eds here as well. It does a lot of work in that rare disease advocacy world. And she wrote about it going up for review. And I'm like, what is she talking about? You know, when you see your friend talk about something and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? Trikafta. And she said, it's going up for review in our state. We don't know if they're going to pick it. Please come to the meeting. If you can't come, submit written comment. Well, that time I couldn't come. So I submitted my written comment. Well, month later, I'm on the phone with Walgreens Specialty Pharmacy, and, you know, they're my like go-to. They do all the CF drugs in Denver and other cities in Colorado, and they're just amazing. And so I'm like talking to them. We're talking about, you know, HealthWell and some of the other copay assistance programs out there. And we're talking about, like, you know, some of my enzymes that are high cost. And we're, you know, I'm like, hey, is HealthWell going to pick that up? And he's like, oh man, HealthWell is closed right now if they're out of money. And just on the day when the PDAB decided to put Trikafta up for review. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, yeah, they went ahead and picked your drug. And I said, okay, why are you concerned about that as a pharmacist, you know? And he said, well, I'm concerned that if they place a UPL or an upper payment limit, which price cap on your drug, I won't be able to stock it, because I won't be able to make up the difference between what the government says they will pay for commercial and private insurance and what the actual manufacturer will actually can agree to pay. And then who's left with that donut, right? The pharmacists and the patients. That's who's left with it. The insurance companies won't have to pay it if the state says this is the cap. And so that sent me into a frenzy of trauma. I mean, just like my mind went back to the sick days of, I literally started having flashbacks of my life when I was sick. And, you know, I just couldn't even fathom going back to a world without Trikafta. I couldn't even, like, I'm like calling my family in Texas going, I think I'm going to have to move back to Texas, you know, just stressing out. And we've built a life here. You know, we have a lot of things that we've worked really hard for. We live out, you know, on land that was really hard to work for and get. And it was just like, we're going to give up our way of life and have to move. And I'm going to be away from National Jewish, where my doctor is, who takes good care of me. Like, I don't think so. And so as I started to talk to other CF patients who knew about it, it wasn't readily out there. It really wasn't. Not a lot of people knew about it. But when they did, they were having the same experience as me. They were just like in depths of despair, just utter loss in confusion and sadness. And I remember, and she has allowed me to say this, and I'm not going to say her name, but I have a patient who called me and said, Amanda, I want to help you with this. Your advocate, I want to help you get this taken care of. She's like, but if I lost Trikafta, I would be suicidal. She said, I can't go back to that life. She said, I can't do it. And I said, you know what? It's okay. You take care of yourself. You take care of your family. We'll advocate for you. If you want me to say something, text me. I will say it for you. That kind of was what started the work, is that I was able to, even in my state of emotional, despair, I was able to compartmentalize it and get on these meetings with the government, get on these meetings with legislators and talk and say, hey, you've got to help us. We need a lifeline. And so I felt like we kind of had to do something to get the word out there. And so we had to start getting the bat signal to the whole country. What was our goal was to let everybody know this was going on, not to scare them. I mean, because the state has basically called me a fearmonger, that I'm scaring people. It's gaslighting, right? I'm not scaring people. You're doing something where we have access to the drug right now, currently. And if you put this into place, we may not have access. That's not fear mongering. That's just truth, And so if we felt like we had to do something. And so when I say we, myself and 3 other CF patients and a mother, we got together and said, what can we do? And so we decided to do a grassroots campaign, and we came up with CF United. And so CF United kind of was born. And it was that's a long answer, but it was born on the backs of, we got to act now. It wasn't, we have time, we can set up, we can see, we can proactively advocate, which is what you and I do right now, right? We're not in like a hot button seat of we have to do it right now, but we're on hey, let's set things up so that we can be proactive instead of reactive. Because what we were in last year was a whole shitstorm of reactive.
It was. And that is the point that you made, and that I say all the time to the lawmakers that I talk to. I say, how much time, money, social media, coffee meetings have you spent talking to your constituents about the PDAB, the Prescription Drug Affordability Board? 0. They haven't educated. There are 1 million people in Michigan that have a rare disease. They have, I would say, maybe 50 people know about it. And that's being, generous. Now, the PDAB didn't pass in Michigan, as you know. They introduced it. Within a week, they passed it through the Senate. I ran to the House with letters from the CF Foundation, from the National Organization of Rare Disorders, and said, do you understand this bill? And they actually agreed and said they didn't, and they pulled it. They stopped it to learn more. But it was like it was intentionally trying to get rammed through before anybody knew about it. That's how it felt. And I know it's going to come back to us, but so continue from there on your fight, because that was one thing I wanted to point out. Same with you. I got my education from you, from Colorado. I was like, oh my gosh, we've got to watch Colorado because it's going to happen in Michigan. And then that shit show of that first and second meeting, oh my gosh.
I'm so glad you showed up, honestly. You and Suri from CFRI.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that stakeholder engagement meeting where we were in the private meeting, it's in public, with the
Right.
the Division of Insurance, because that was supposed to make us feel more comfortable. So, and then the board didn't even show up. It was like, are you freaking kidding me? You guys are voting on literally whether we live or die, and you're not going to show up to the meeting. But at the time, what we didn't know is that the Division of Insurance tells the board not to come to those meetings. So we didn't know that. So we were all blaming the board, right? And, we were so upset. I mean, those meetings were horrible. All of us, I don't think there was a dry eye in those meetings.
Oh, no. It was actually unbelievable to me. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion because you were in such disbelief. Like, is this really happening? They were rude, dismissive, uneducated about cystic fibrosis. No one there had any experience with CF. It was, and to be fair, they, on their side, they didn't know anything. They were learning as they went, and I guess they didn't know what they didn't know. And thank goodness for Senator Kirkmeyer,
Oh
who
my God.
stood up there in Colorado,
Yes.
and said, you know what, the rare community is actually right. This isn't
Right. It's not an insulin cap. And so that's the deal here is, and people, you're right. We have to give them a little grace because they don't understand. It's hard to understand when you're not in this community, don't have a rare disease. And our governor several years ago got insulin caps to pass here. So he uses that as a story, but it's just not the same, right? Because there's a lot of people on insulin.
right. It's like saying that insulin and drugs are great and affordable in Canada. That myth is so misused by presidents and people that should know better. They don't have it better in Canada. Their drugs aren't as affordable. And because their parliament doesn't want to pay for expensive drugs, then they have no access.
Right. And so like we do have some access.
That is the bottom line in Colorado.
Right.
It's
Right.
access.
Access.
It's exactly what you said. Yes.
Yeah, access. That's what's confusing because I'll admit it. Before I got into this world, I also thought Canadian CFers were just like, well, besides the Trikafta thing. But other than that, like, healthcare, hospitalizations, they were doing better off than us, and I don't know if you remember, but years ago, they were living 10 years longer than us US CFers. This was before modulators, but they were, because their expenses were covered. But the modulators and the gene therapies has made the world just different in a good way, amazing way, but also these reimbursement things, they just don't work very well. And so speaking of Canada, one of the main reasons that I was able to get kind of organized and get our voices heard is I consulted with Stephanie Stravos. I'm not sure if you know her, but she is actually one of the main founders of CF Get Loud. So, and I don't know if you remember back in the day when they didn't have Trikafta.
Oh, I remember my friend Beth Vanstone from Canada.
They got loud, boy, did they ever. And she is she's so professional, but real. She's real. She just says it like it is, but she's also like, she will advocate with grace. And I always am impressed by her. And I didn't know it was her behind Get Loud. She's in a mom's group with me. CF, we have a group of our own with mothers who have CF. And I was just in despair. I said, can anyone help me? She calls me. We stay on the phone probably for like 3 hours in the middle of the night. I'm not kidding. And she tells me, okay, this is how you do it. This is how we organize. This is how we set you up. This is how we get the word out. This is what we did here. It worked here. I can help you. We can do this in America. And I'm like, this is unreal to me on a level of that I'm having to have a campaign. In America, I'm having to have a campaign to keep a drug. Whereas like the UK, Canada, Australia, all those other countries, they have very fierce campaign advocacy groups like Get Loud because they had to do it to get that drug in their country. It was like mind-boggling to me that she's like, you're the American me. And I'm like, no, I can't be. I can't be. There's got to be someone else doing this, And she's like, no, y'all are it. And so now we didn't even have it any on the level as Get Loud. Get Loud, got Trikafta to their whole country. So they're just absolutely amazing. But she helped me realize why things were the way they were. And so basically she's like, you have to just be, like you said, you have to be in the middle. You have to get along with everybody. You have to work with everybody. You can't blame pharma. You can't blame insurance. You can't, you can blame them. We all know we can blame them, but you got to work with them to get this passed. You got to work with legislators. You got to go across party lines. This is bipartisan, And so when we were all thinking about what to name CF United, she said, America is very divided. It's very divided. What can you do, to come up with something? And I said, when we all were like, united. The only way we're going to win this is if all of the CF patients are united together. one voice, be one large voice amplifying. We can't argue with each other because we do. It's even though I literally love every CF patient, and that doesn't mean I always get along with all of them, right? Or do they get along with me? But most of the time, I can have the respect because they're going through what I'm going through. And so I had to have the respect in a conversation, be like, I may not particularly agree with this one little part, but I still love you. You're still fighting out there. You're still going. And so she was like, you really have to make sure everybody knows. And because when you're in that kind of like high stress environment, it's very easy to put the blame. And I did it at first too. So I'm not perfect. That first stakeholder meeting, you saw me, I was madder than hell. And I had to really rein myself back in after that and just, say, okay. And a lot of, my friend, a lot of Sabrina, she's the calm version of me. And she's like, look, you're not wrong, but you can't let them take that from you. You gotta get your composure, and everybody was saying that to me. Get your composure. But the reason I got so mad in that meeting is what people didn't know behind the scenes. I had already educated those people that were in those meetings. I had already sent them to all national CF foundations and, we had already met with them. We had already sent them emails. We had already picked apart the bill and said, hey, what's going on here? Where's our advocate? Where's our rare disease advocate? Because in the PDAB bill, it says we're supposed to have a chronic disease advocate. No one ever got back to me on that. And so that's what was frustrating. And a lot of people didn't know that. And so it made me look kind of crazy because I'm like,
I didn't think you looked crazy at all. I think it was really eye-opening for so many, and the emotion of everything that was happening was so real. And I think it was necessary. I think it really showed the fear and everything that was going on and how scary it is for an adult woman. I thought it was important. And I think it actually made a difference. I think the opposite would be, you can't be just so polite all the time. Like no one hears you.
right.
And as women, we do that more, and men won't. Men will say, you know what, this is bullshit, or this is stupid, or this isn't working, or what can we do to fix it, but I think, it's fine.
Women go at it like that, or bitches, like, oh, that girl's, or she's, emotional, or, I've heard that a time or two, but I will say a lot of the advocacy work that I do, they were a lot of times tell me, you know what, your emotion is what really helped me remember you and your story. Because I get sometimes when I'm speaking at like a Capitol or, and these government, it's so intimidating. You only have 2 minutes to speak and make your voice heard, right? And you have to really you're trying to express yourself in 2 minutes, say what you need to say to make a difference, to make them change their minds, to make them help you, to solicit some kind of emotion to help pass the laws that you need. And I always start crying when I'm talking about my story. And it used to frustrate me, So I'm like, God dang it. I am trying to be professional and, be, what's the word? I can't even speak it, articulate. I'm trying to articulate my thoughts. And then I'm over here, last year when I'm at a hearing, the Senate hearing, I'm freaking bawling, and it's embarrassing. And it's so
not. I mean, I get why you think it's embarrassing, but
yeah. I always get good responses after. They're always like, they come up to me later. Like a senator came up to me after and he said, my dad was with me at the hearing and he practically hugged my dad. Like he shook his hand and was like, because my dad, while I'm talking, and I'm like, the Capitol is about, I would say maybe like not very far away from my hospital in Denver. I have to drive quite a way. A lot of CF patients do. We have to drive.
Yeah.
That's another issue with barriers to access. And so we were driving. And so I'm like, I was living down the street from you guys here in Denver, Colorado. I was living here. Whereas I live in a rural area. I was like, I don't want to go back there. I was like, you guys will be visiting me in my hospital bed. We'll be having meetings, I don't know what to tell you, but we will be doing it. And that's when I think my dad just started. Our families have PTSD. I mean, I can imagine you feel the same. Like you probably remember when your daughters, I don't know what their health level was, but I'm sure it wasn't as good as it is now. You remember those times and those.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's funny on what makes me cry, like when you were talking about that. It's when somebody used to ask me to explain what CF was, and I had my line down: cystic fibrosis is a genetic disease that causes chronic and fatal illness, blah blah blah. And I used to never be able to get through that. I don't know why, but that would make me cry. And if somebody's fingers were clubbed, that I couldn't even, I had to go to the bathroom and go cry, because it was just, I don't know, it was certain things were like, oh my gosh, it just means they're not breathing very well. And it upset me so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's just little things and all that trauma. And I also didn't realize how much trauma it was. Like, I just was like, keep on going every day, just keep going,
Swimming, yep.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I get that. There's all these little triggers. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sent me through, and it wasn't just me. A lot of us talked about it. And then so what happened is that our story got to the news, because it was just so bad. It was a bad situation. And the news started listening to us. At first, the media didn't, because they were like, this is going to help lower drug costs, and Governor Polis says so. And, the Division of Insurance is just trying to help you. And then once these people actually started going to the meetings and seeing what was happening, they were like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should actually talk to these patients, And so a lot of patients went to the meeting and they got stories, they got stories. And so like, it was Hannah, and then there was another CF mom named Stacy, and she got on there and said, this board didn't show up to our meeting. And that was like huge, Yeah. And so basically all of the media attention. And then we also, on the flip side, were writing and calling legislators. We were doing all of that at the same time and trying to have meetings and see people and talk to them. I mean, it was just nuts. But while we were doing that, like, I think the collective effort. So basically 20 legislators sent the Division of Insurance, the commissioner, a letter saying, halt review of Trikafta now. That was huge. I remember that day. I was running around in town doing errands, had to go to a doctor's appointment, and I got immediately on my live and said, I had no makeup on, just looked like utter crap. I was so tired and scared. I was like, guys, I think we've just received a lifeline. These people are going to help us. And it did. They did not help the review. The insurance commissioner wrote a really scathing report back to these people. But that being said, it was huge. And those people, I think they were having meetings at the Capitol or wherever about us. And we just didn't even know about it. And that's the thing that I think a lot of us don't realize, like when we're really upset, we're like, nobody's helping us, healthcare, But there are some people that get it, like a lot of them have told me, hey, my niece has CF, or my cousin. Or, like I was at a Colorado RDAC meeting the other day, and I was speaking, and they said, this woman she's a physician. She said, my 2 nieces have CF and they're pregnant right now. She's like, we are fans of you. Because sometimes I wonder if people are fans or if they think I'm just a Karen, what is it Boone complaining about all the time? And she's like, no, we're fans of you. We know what you're talking about because they've been in that world. Or they have another rare disease, that's not CF. But as you and I know, we've connected with people with rare diseases because it's so similar in the fact that how hard we have to fight.
Yes, exactly. And it ended with them deciding that Trikafta wasn't too expensive or wasn't going to be removed, which is a relief, but there's still so much more work to do, because what if this new drug that's out, is that going to take another hit, or is it another drug in the future?
I worry about the other states, like you said.
Oh, right. Like Michigan. Yeah.
Right. Like you said, like right after our thing, you were like, hey guys, it's great that Colorado got it, but let's not forget that this could happen again. And I mean, They were very clear at that meeting when they said we were determined I don't even know how they said it, not unaffordable. I'm like, just say affordable.
Right.
I remember 2 of them said, if one person lets me know they cannot afford their payment, we'll reopen this. And so it was kind of like a threat,
Right.
And
Definitely.
Like, and that's not to say that I don't want people calling if they can't afford the drug. I do. But we literally polled everybody in the CF community, not their data. We polled our own people and said, can you afford Trikafta? Do you have copay assistance programs? Do you get it? And most everybody paid under $50 a month, literally. So I'm not saying that there's not issues with like some people that can't afford it. And I'm also not defending the price. That's a huge also misnomer here that the government and other people they attack us. They attack patients. It's really sick. And they tell us, well, you think that price is okay? Like we have any control over that.
Right. And that's not our fight in this case, in this situation. If they want to take care of pricing, copay accumulator, go down that coupon road, go down and take care of that. And copay accumulator can't get passed. So there are so many things. But before we leave the PDAB, talk about the influences that seem to have a different agenda, like the Arnold Ventures and ICER, which is the Institute for Economic and Clinical Review. And what was it? Wasn't it United Healthcare with Jane? Was that United Healthcare? Yeah.
Not with United Healthcare, but she's a health policy expert. So she serves the Senate Finance Committee, which is huge because that means our lawmakers listen to her.
And she's welcome to come on our show if she wants us to get her side. We welcome you.
I know. Yes. In fact, I was going to put out a thing the other day and say, you know what, Jane, next time you're in Colorado, let me know, let's talk about this, But so one of the main issues that a lot of patients have with the PDAB is that they use something called quality adjusted life years in their data, because they use ICER data. Portal are academics who use ICER. The PDAB contracts with Portal, pays them to do these data things. They use this data and it's really illegal, and it's also discriminatory.
It's so discriminatory.
Really bad. I mean, it's stuff that they basically are saying that we're never going to get cured, so they can value our medication at a lower price. So it's way more complicated than that. But I have never known anybody in the rare disease space who likes ICER. Just say, because they do so many things that aren't fair and equitable. For one, they value our drugs before they even get out to the market. So it's like a subgroup of people. For instance, I wasn't on the Trikafta study.
And none of the people at the time when I was testifying to ICER and hopping on these calls and saying basically what we're saying here today is that none of them were specialists in CF. They weren't familiar with CF patients. Again, no experience, no knowledge.
No.
But basically deciding, and if you don't think this is a correct example, let me know. But I always tell people, if you're in a wheelchair, ICER values your life as less important than someone who is, quote, normal. They want everybody normal, which is just crazy town.
And how it affects, a lot of people say, well, who cares? It's just some academics doing their thing. But no, it's not just, it affects insurance reimbursement. That's why it matters. Because some insurance companies, United Healthcare for one, looks at these reimbursement values that ICER puts on our drugs, puts the price that they deem appropriate on our drugs. They could choose not to reimburse based on those stats and that data. So that's why it's so important. It's not just them academics doing something in a vacuum. It has real world implications. And so, so for instance, I looked up my quality score or CF because I looked up the Trikafta review. The Trikafta review quality score is 21 to 22%, which out of 100. So that means I am valued at 22% of a whole person. I'm not even half a person. Like what? And they do this for other diseases too. Like a friend of mine's autistic. She's 30%. I mean, it's gross. It's so gross to value our lives. And in any ways, that's their opinion about the value of Trikafta in my life. What they're not looking at is, $300,000 a week in the hospital. Don't have that at 6 times a year anymore. I don't know how much a transplant is, but I know it's over $1 million. Don't have that anymore. IV infusions that I was doing for at one time 9 months, $5,000 a month. That was my copay. We're not even talking about the amount that was billed to my insurance. So and then like parents at these Trikafta review meetings for PDAB were saying, I was able to go back to work because I wasn't taking full-time care, having to take care of my child all of the time. So therefore, my societal value has gone up because I'm able to work, and NCF patients able to work. The societal value, there's other factors besides just what ICER looks at. And not to mention, the National Council on Disability is a federal government agency who advises the President of the United States, says they're discriminatory. So they have actually banned them in federal negotiations. So it's weird that these states are popping up with these things and they're using this discriminatory value. So many advocates, disability lawyers, advocates have paved the way not to use these type of measures, but they're just like popping up again. It's like, what?
Right. It is definitely a game of whack-a-mole. It is constantly, and it's exhausting. You're just like, wow.
Yeah.
It's one bill.
Your life value.
Yeah. Constantly working on prior authorization and step therapy. And there are so many bills to support. So somebody who is in the middle of it, raising a young child, cleaning machines, and just exhausted from raising a child with cystic fibrosis or a rare disease, how do you think the best way is for us to bring them up to speed? And everybody can only do so much. Not everyone can advocate to the extent you and I do. It may be just a phone call. It may be just shooting an email. But what do you think is a great way for us to help more people understand what's going on?
I think a first great step is just to try to reach out to your representatives and tell them about CF. You don't even have to go into everything. You can just say, hey, I'm worried about this because this is my life story. The other next thing that I would say that is equally important is get yourself aligned with organizations who have a voice. So coalitions, like coalitions like that you and I are part of. So a huge resource that I look to is RAP, Rare Access Action Project, because they literally get into the nitty gritty of why and how we can have access to our medications and to protect future access. They have the experience with it. And they're also already in the lawmaking space as far as speaking with legislators all the time, guiding them, and they have the facts to back up what we're saying. So like as I hear you and I are talking, they have, models of why this doesn't work, what we could do, solutions. So I think going and joining those groups or joining or just reaching out to one of us. So you can go to CF United on either Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or you can go to our website, which is cysticfibrosisunited.org. And we have on there our stories. We have the news stories. We also have resources, our advocacy resources. So basically, we have listed there any organization that is in this rare disease space and talking about access to drugs. We have them listed, and those are people to join because, like you said, we're all tired. We can't always do it all, and so it's good to get into these meetings and these coalitions. And even if you can't go to a meeting, you can send an email. Like you said, you can just send an email and say, "Hey, how do I get it done?" And so I think it's really important. I'm also a part of a coalition here in Colorado called Colorado Patients Taking Action. And that is huge because we had to set up now, and it basically talks about the PDAB and other legislation that affects patients. And so I think if you have something like that in your state that you can join, it just helps amplify your voice, And I do think also that, when CFRI sends out those emails and they say advocacy updates, I think if you can just pay attention to those. I've learned that over this past year. I'm not an expert by any means, but I learned that, okay, they're putting this out there. All I have to do is click and it takes me to where I need to go. So like, for instance, when they posted about the FDA gene therapy meeting, I don't know if you went to that, but that was a huge resource because it was for people who are on modulators. The FDA wants to hear from people on modulators. What? That's weird. We can just talk to the FDA. Apparently you can now. It's like, it's like just getting yourself, even if you don't have the courage to speak, because at first when I would join these meetings with like, things like that, I wouldn't always speak. I would listen. And sometimes you have the courage to say, oh, hey, you hear someone else talk about something. You're like, oh, wait, yeah, I know what she's talking about. I can piggyback off of that,
And plus, it's so funny when so many people hear the NIH and the FDA, they think of buildings. Like, I think the picture in their mind is of buildings.
Yeah.
When you and I think of the FDA and the NIH now, we think of people. We
Yes.
think of the people that we have talked to that are incredible, that listen, that are like, we're getting this done. You
Right.
know, I want to get this done. And also, the Partnership to Improve Patient Care, PIPC, with Sarah and Thayer.
That is the one I'm trying to, and was like, that's who I really wanted to mention. I'm so glad you brought that up because
They're fantastic.
Yes.
Thayer and Sarah, they are
Yes.
fantastic, and they have a newsletter that has a lot of information on bills. I mean, it's everything you need to know.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, why recreate the work that someone has already done? You know, like
Right.
I've learned that, and you know, last year when when nobody knew about PDAB yet, we were doing a lot of just like a lot of time consuming work. But then when you look out there, you're like, oh, this has already been done. Somebody else is already talking about this, and they've got the stats to back it up, and they've got it all written out here, and all I have to do is drop a link. So, like for instance, this past week when the RDAC was asking me about follies and trying to figure out the discriminatory nature because they didn't know, they knew a little, I just sent them a link to PIPC, National Council on Disability, RAP, local Colorado disability law, that kind of stuff. Like, and it's just easy to say, hey, go here, and then you can get yourself, there's all these meetings are virtual. You can just go and sit, even if you don't, sometimes I'm busy doing something else and I'll just listen to the background and be like, oh, wait a minute. And then I'll hear somebody say something and I'll be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense,
Yeah. And Terry Wilcox and Eli Rushbanks, Patients Rising, they're fabulous.
I have recently partnered with Patients Rising because, for one, if you're probably starting to get to know them as well, there are spirit animals because they care about the patients. All the other white noise, between everything, the insurance, the hospitals, the pharmaceuticals, the legislators, all of that, they work with all of those part people, but they are strict on this is the patient's voice. This is what we need to stay. And that's how I like to stay. I like to stay for the patient's voice. And they're just really like direct and they really get things done. They really actually do the work, and get it done and don't just write a letter. Like I get so tired of sometimes nonprofits that are really big, like huge nonprofits that write these random memos that are like, this is what we've done this year. And, and it's just like, you know what I mean? They're bullet points. It's like, but really, were you in the Capitol? I didn't see you in the Capitol with me. Like it's just like but they literally like get it done. And they also share patient stories. I'm so glad you reminded me of that because you can literally go on there and enter your name, enter your disease if you want. You don't have to share it. You can say chronic disease, tell your story, upload a picture. They put it on their site and they have it mapped out across the nation. They have like states and you can click on the state and see a patient story. And they're doing also a masterclass on legislative matters to kind of give you a 101 on what to do, how to advocate. So yeah,
that is great. Yeah. What are your hopes and where do you see yourself moving forward today, like for the next year? What's your worry and where are you going?
Well, I would say, I'm like, that's a loaded question, Laura. No, geez.
It is. I mean, it really is. But yeah.
I mean, because, with all the United Healthcare stuff with the CEO being murdered, it's just been a nut.
I mean,
it's awful. I mean, I'm not
never acceptable. No.
I'm not condoning violence. Don't get me wrong, but I have been in those CF forums, and I mean, with the memes and stuff, with like the the insurance stuff. It's like it's awful, and I don't result in violence, but it does kind of it hits on the fact that we as Americans we're tired. We're tired of this faulty healthcare system.
Well, it's a wound that is open. It's a wound for people who are dealing with this, but oh my gosh, no, there's nothing that's ever acceptable to.
No, I mean, and in fact, what we do is the alternative. It really is. If you think about it, what patient advocates do, it's the best alternative because what we do might take years, but I'm not killing anyone.
Right. And it saves your mental health, really.
Right.
I think doing something like this is what saves your mental health because then you feel like you do have skin in the game, you have control.
Right.
You know some of the players, if not all of them, and they know who you are, and they're like, oh my gosh, here she comes again, or whatever. But,
Let me go back on the Arnold Ventures thing, because I don't think I ever answered you there. So Arnold Ventures is a huge quote nonprofit philanthropy group that donates a lot of money to politics and educational reforms and policies. They basically dictate policy because they spent $27 million to fund ICER. $27 million. 2.5 for the academic group portal. 7.8 million to NASHP, which is the National Association of State Policy and Health. That's who dictates literally laws in the states. So PDAB, they made PDAB. They fund these huge think tanks, they call them. And unfortunately, it's, a lot of their stuff is based off discriminatory measures. So the person that they have, who is one of their front runners, who they fund, her name is Jane Horvath. She also helped write PDAB law, and she does a lot of other things. She talks about our reproductive cells. She talks about patients with cystic fibrosis and rare diseases. She talks about the fact that our reproductive cells are not treated with the drug. Therefore, our children are little pharmaceutical market, endeavors. I mean, that's just sick. That's sick to talk about us like that in a public. She goes around and testifies in these different state meetings and talks about this, and that's just scary. So I guess what I want to say to tie that back on is that that's kind of what keeps me up at night right now, is that these big, powerful, political, even some academia, some even journalists, they even also fund journalists. And so what's scary about that is that the political power that they have and the sway that they have because of the money that goes into these types of things, and that they're actually literally buying politicians. It sounds like conspiracy theory, but I mean, you can look on their 990. They gave $1.2 million to the state legislature in Denver this past year. I mean, that's
wow.
What? So it's like, when you know that people in their group who are front runners of their organization have this bias against people with rare diseases. That's scary to think, that they're talking about us like we're just like we're a number, like we're a number on their budget, that they just want, like we're in a survival of the fittest mentality society right now. And it's like, that kind of stuff is really scary. So I guess what I'm trying to do is make sure that the rare disease population is protected. Make sure that we can educate people on why science and innovation is so necessary, and we need to keep those lines open. So those are the things right now I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make sure, for one, everybody quits using those quality measures that are discriminatory and other measures like that. And I want to make sure that actually it gets enforced. Like, even if the federal government says, hey, this is a no-go, I want to make sure that it's actually a no-go. It's enforced. It's wrong. Stop it. Cut it. And I also just want to make sure the rare disease patients, I would like for them to be exempted from these types of price capping situations, because it just doesn't work for us. And so a lot of people have said to me, well, I mean, why are you still complaining? Trikafta didn't get reviewed. Well, because it's not just about me anymore, because the next rare drug that comes up is going to be a very similar situation, if not the same situation. And how that got read up to me is at the Capitol last year when I was testifying for the rare disease carve-out that we also didn't pass because of political stuff. So I understand how you feel. It felt awful after working so hard on it. It's been passed in Oregon and Washington. They have a carve-out there. And so I thought we could get it done here, and it didn't happen, for a lot of different reasons. But there was a mom sitting next to me who was testifying, and her daughter has such a rare disease, I can't even pronounce it. And there was 3 people in our state that have this disease. And she told me the other 2 parents, their children had passed. And so she's sitting there, and the reason she was testifying is her daughter's drug is on the list to be reviewed at some point. She doesn't know when, but it's just like in the back of her mind, she's stressing. She doesn't know when they're going to approve it. So she's constantly, looking up what drugs are they reviewing now. She's completely stressed out. And she was just, she met with me after the meeting and said, what can we do? What can I do? Will you help me? And I'm like, absolutely. I will absolutely help you. It's not just about just protecting CF patients. It's about protecting all of us. because we all have that in common. And these policy laws and these things that go on, they do affect all of us in that very unique way that only rare can really understand, because of the years and years we waited to even have something available, and the people who don't have anything. So like we were talking about that FDA meeting, I was driving, listening to it partly, and people were begging and pleading for a gene therapy or some type of therapy for their child, just pleading for the FDA to try to speed up the process, and it's like, they don't even have that lifeline. So,
Right.
that kind of thing just, it really settles with you, and it makes you think you've got to do something. And not to mention, CF patients might be safer now, but it's going to come up in other states. And I've already seen Trikafta on lists. I saw it on the New Hampshire list. I've seen it in other states. Because Trikafta and the nature of the drug and being the orphan drug status and being is expensive, just like all orphan drugs are, it's going to be on lists. So therefore, it probably will come up again. I hope what we did here makes it to where it won't. I hope.
Right. I hope so too. And I think in wrapping up, to kind of end where we started, is when you were talking about CF Get Loud in Canada, it's about everybody hearing our voices, and it's about education, and continues to be the fact that we're not just fighting for the CF community, it's for the rare disease. We want everyone to have access, and it isn't just about one drug, because another drug will have that issue, and it is about raising awareness. And then you go to the other side of what it does for other rare diseases. So the cystic fibrosis strong community rubs off on other smaller rare communities. And then our drugs and how our scientists got to this point helped the sickle cell community get their cure.
Right.
I mean, it's only because of the research and everything that went into cystic fibrosis that got them a cure. If we don't continue to demand, people listen to us and their support, like all these other things get impacted, research and development will take a hit. And that's exactly what you started about talking about with the PDAB. So I know we have to wrap up because we've talked about so many things, but I thank you for all you're doing and just all the awareness that you've brought to not only Colorado, but Michigan and the country. Thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you for having me. And I'm really thankful for you too. I wish I had met you at the beginning of the PDAB ordeal, because I think I would have felt more hope, knowing that we had allies, that we had people who are strong advocates like yourself, because that's what you don't want to feel alone in this. You don't want to feel isolated, So I just want to thank you for all of your hard work. And the stuff that we do is sometimes not always as out there because it's so complicated and it's hard to understand. And so I really want to thank you for just, getting in the middle of it and just sometimes just showing up is the best thing to do, So thank you.
Yeah, so much mutual love and respect for each other for sure. And we are going to need you for what's going on in Michigan. So thanks in advance.
I will.
All right.
I'm hoping to have an ambassador in every state. That's my goal in the future, is to have an ambassador that, that I can kind of guide and help and then they go do their own thing. It doesn't mean I'm going to say, oh, you have to do it this way, because every state's so different. But I would love to, if anybody's out there listening and you have CF or your child or your niece, anybody, caregiver, parent, supporter, and you want to get involved, I would love for you to find me on social media or find CF United.
All your information's in show notes. So yes, definitely people should contact you.
I would love to eventually, I don't know how long that's going to take, but I would love for us to have a you and a me and a Stephanie, a Sabrina, all these other, people. I'd love to have somebody who's the go-to person in each state. If, that may be a lofty goal, but that would be cool.
No, I would even say country, but we'll get there.
There you go. That would be global. That would be awesome.
Right. It would be. Well, thanks, Amanda.
Have a good weekend.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen,
It's not complicated.
who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org.
This podcast was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now.